Hello, 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 and welcome to yet another edition of the Project Sanity Show. My name is Nis Pedersen, and usually I would be queuing in my co-host and co-founder Richard Green right about now, but he has a leave of absence from our show this week. This week I'm being joined by Dave Coennen as my co-host, and we have an amazing show for you tonight. In the good tradition of last week's epic show with a great roundtable put together last minute by our amazing team here at the Project Sanity Show, we're going to do yet another roundtable. We are joined today by Tambourine Borelli, a grassroots activist who has been inspired by Bernie Sanders to run for state senate. She is also now currently helping Election Justice USA in changing our electoral process in the United States back to hand-counted paper ballots. More about that later. We're also joined by Dan Santon, who was also a delegate from the 9th District from Washington State. Hello, 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 and welcome to yet another. And I am rebroadcasting my sound. There we go. So we will also be joined by Sean Comfort, who is an elected delegate from the 5th District of Washington, and who is today working, hoping to have a positive impact on ending cyclical poverty. So with this in mind, Dave, why don't you tell us a bit about last week's show and what we're hoping to do today?
Well, Nis, last week, you know, you guys did, it was such an amazing week at the DNC. And everybody did such just yeoman's work, and we were all really burned out. And you gave us the reins last week, and we ended up hijacking the show for an entire 2 hours of discussion with delegates from the DNC and what they experienced. And it was quite dynamic, and it was really probably one of the best shows on the topic. And there were a lot of delegates that watched it and actually wanted to come back and talk about their experience, and even go beyond that now and talk about the way forward and what we do now as progressives, now that the Democratic Party has rejected us in some eyes or embraced us in some eyes. But the debate continues, and we're gonna continue with that the first hour here on Project Sanity. And I look forward to hearing from all of our guests. I'm familiar with Tambourine. I've seen interviews with her, I believe, on Tim Black's show, but some other digital media. So I'm looking forward to today's discussion, Nis, and getting into the news into the second hour. But since we have all of our guests with us ready to go in the green room here, we're going to get right into the discussion with Adair and our three other delegates.
Okay, so with that in mind, I would like if we could go around the room and have each of you present yourself with your own words and talk to us about just 1 minute on what is right now the premier thing that you're working for, kind of a short top 5, who you are and then what you're working on. And if we can start with Tambourine Borelli. You're muted, Tambourine. You need to unmute yourself. Yes, I make that mistake.
There I am. Awesome. So as it was said in the introduction, I was inspired by Bernie Sanders and just kind of went full throttle. Became a delegate, ran for Senate. But now, you know, now that the powers that be have selected, and I did use that word purposely, selected their queen, we have to remember that it doesn't matter now, you know, in regard to experiencing the type of election fraud that we did in this election cycle. We have to make sure that every election from now until the end does not end up the same way, and how we're going to go about that. It's a multifaceted strategy, but one of the ways is to revert back to the hand-counted paper ballots. So I'll talk more about that later, but I'm very excited to be here, and thank you so much for asking me to be on the show.
No, you're very welcome, and thank you for being here. Dan Sanson, why don't we take you?
Hi, so I am glad I started in this process by caucus, just like a lot of other delegates, and made my way through the LD and CD caucuses to become a delegate. My current focus right now that I'm working on is working actively in my LD, my legislative district, and trying to organize and get more progressive voices at the table within the Democratic Party.
Okay. So, Democratic Party reformer. Would that be fair to say?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes. Trying the traditional route.
Okay. What about, we also have Sean Comfort from the 5th District of Washington.
Thank you for having me on the show today, guys. I am currently involved in a couple different things, mostly working with local candidates. I was also elected during the caucus process here in Washington State, and am really looking forward to putting some progressives into office here on the eastern side of Washington. I don't know if you guys know, but where I'm at in Spokane is a little blue dot in a big red ocean of politics over here. So we're looking to expand, turn some districts purple, turn some districts blue, and we've got a lot of really great candidates that are really pushing the envelope here, who have also been inspired by Bernie Sanders. So I'm going to be working with them pretty closely, trying to get people like Charlotte G., Scott Stucker, and Andrew Viviano all into office over here. So it's going to be a little bit of work, but I think we can do it this cycle.
Okay. So that was also one of the big contentions of last week's discussion, and also one of the big discussions that is going on in the blogosphere and in the news media, Facebook, basically everywhere within the Democratic Party ranks, whether or not you should reform from within or build new without, whether you should vote third party, vote your conscience, or you should vote lesser evil. So I would ask to all of you, if any of you would care to give your take on your take on third party candidacies, new party, and Democratic Party reform.
All right, so I'll take the lead on this. I'm voting Joe Stein in the fall, period. But as I mentioned last week, I feel that it's going to take a coalition in order for a third party to become a viable party across the board in the future. At the every level from dog catcher all the way through U.S. Senator. I think that if we're going to enact real change, we both have to stay within the Democratic Party, because if we leave altogether, then there's no one there to actually enact any of the change. But I also think that liberal Democrats need to be willing to reach out and not be beholden just to the party line, and help out Green Party candidates, help out other liberal candidates who might not be running under the tag of Democrat. So I think there needs to be some type of coalition, otherwise a third party in general just isn't feasible. However, I think this year is a good year to start that coalition.
Okay, Tambourine, do you have any thoughts on that? You're muted again.
I actually didn't mute myself. I didn't know I was muted.
When we
you do it for me.
We just start muting people.
Got it. Okay, so I do have a thought on that, and here's the thing. If we don't do a paradigm shift in our thinking in regard to that regurgitated frame of mind that says, oh, you can't vote third party because you're just gonna, let the opposition win if you do that, because they can't possibly, third parties can't possibly take the race. So the problem with that is, if we continue to do that, when will we garner enough strength as a third party to actually become viable? So I think that there is absolute worth to those who are inspired to stay within the party and change within it. I think that is absolutely possible, and those that are inspired to do that should do that. However, those that are inspired to take their energy and their passion to put into a third, maybe fourth, even fifth party, then we have something, because until we do that, we will always be at the behest of the two powerful entities that squash and quell our very democracy. So I think it's very dangerous to continue the conversation that we should not put our energy into a third party because it would fail. It will fail if we never try.
Okay. Dan, your comments on that?
So I believe that a lot of the problems and woes that we experienced at the DNC and throughout this primary process are a result of a system that was built up, which is 2 years, and I feel like we could fix the system that created the monster that's become the result of the primary process by entering in, getting elbow deep in the muck and mire, and getting dirty, getting the work done to reform the party through existing channels.
Okay, so I hear a lot about reforming the party and from within, but I very rarely hear anything about how to do that when the powers that be in the party are so concerned with fundraising that the Democratic Party has gone from being the union-funded party to being the bank and Wall Street and everything else funded party. Like, when you're awash and addicted to that campaign finance money, how do you wean them off?
Ultimately, with campaign finance, in terms of the presidential race, that's going to be very hard to change. But we can change the party from within through the local races, through the standing committees that actually make the decisions that impact policy on a national level. Through this caucus process and going to the national convention, it's become really apparent to me that when there's the phrase "all politics is local," I get that in my soul. Like the silver-haired grandmas and grandpas at your local LD have a significant impact in the national conversation, and I found that they're at least in my LD, they're very receptive to the changing of the guard and passing on the torch and into the party and help enact the change. So even with the third-party candidates, I understand that you can't, if you don't vote for the third party, they'll never get big. But to build a coalition, you also have to have people within the major party as well. And you know, we've been very close. The Washington delegation has maintained communications outside of the DNC, so that I look forward to keeping those common ground. And I'd love to reform the Democratic Party to make a comfortable seat for a third party to make a coalition in the future. It's definitely what Bernie was talking about with the Our Revolution kickoff event on Monday during the DNC.
Okay. Sean, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I have a lot of respect for people who are going out to other parties, whether it's the Green Party, the Libertarian Party, the Progressive Party. What people don't really understand is there are a lot of other parties other than the two big third parties that get talked about a lot. My personal take on it is that the people are the caretakers of our governmental system, and the people have been lax in their duty of doing the caretaking. We don't do the research that is needed in order to make choices on who should be our representatives in our government. We basically vote down party line. And so what I'm advocating for anyone I talk to is I don't want you to vote for a party anymore. What I want you to do is I want you to go out, spend 15 minutes of time doing just a little bit of research on the candidates in your local area, you know, on the candidates on a national stage, and find out who is really actually representing you. And what you're going to find down the line is that one party is going to represent you more than another party, but that's where you can't stop. What you've got to do is you've got to actually show up to the meetings, to your local LD, to your local county meetings, because what you don't realize is that the person who shows up has a voice and has the power. I actually noticed it just this last week. I was actually at our county precinct committee officer meeting, which is the lowest level of getting involved. I'm actually going to be a PCO in December.
I just have a quick comment. There are a lot of people in Arizona who showed up but didn't get a voice anyway.
I absolutely agree with you, and so part of that is that we have to look at ways to reform the way that we actually do the voting. And of course, Sam Breen can talk to you a little bit more about this with the Election Justice USA and the kind of reports that have come out after what happened in Arizona, what happened in New York. We even actually experienced it here in Washington State when non-resident precinct committee or non-resident delegates, alternates, would be able to be sat as delegates in other precincts, which has never happened before in Washington State. So there is definitely something that we've got to do, but what you can't do is you can't just show up to vote, is what I'm saying. If those people in Arizona had showed up at their local committee meetings, at their local county meetings, they might have actually been able to foresee that and forestall that. I'm not blaming the people of Arizona. Obviously, there was some really unfortunate things that happened there that were out of their control, and it was completely a national disgrace. It was an embarrassment to democracy. But going forward, we need to be involved at the local level. And the more people who show up, the more representative your democracy is going to be. Right now, I think Adair talked about the silver-haired old ladies and the silver-haired old men that show up to these meetings, and that might seem like a trope, that might seem like a stereotype, but walking into one of these rooms, it really is the older generation that has been involved for so long. What I'm really excited about with our revolution and with the kind of support that Bernie Sanders has actually created is he's actually created a lot of that energy for young people, people younger than me. I'm talking kids that are 14, 15, up through their mid-20s, to actually get involved in their government, and that is exactly what we need in order to see some of these positive changes actually happen in our local governments. And once you take over the local governments like we have here in Washington State, in my 3rd legislative district, we went, there's 84 positions for precinct committee officers. There's 84 precincts in my city. There was only 22 or 23 precinct committee officers before. Now, after this last primary, we're only missing 22 or 23 out of the 84, which is absolutely unprecedented, never happened before, and people who want to still get involved can still be appointed for those final positions, and we're actually going to have a full house of precinct committee officers who get to vote on their state committee people, and those state committee people get to vote on the executive board stuff. So it really starts at the ground level and funnels up, and that's where we're actually going to see that change happening.
Okay, so what I'm hearing from all three of you and from Adair is local involvement seems to be somewhat of a consensus we can come to that we have to go into. And I don't know, Tambourine, would you care to comment on Adair's and Dan's idea on building a coalition both within and without the Democratic Party? Do you think that's feasible? You have to unmute yourself again.
That is absolutely hilarious. Okay. Not only do I think that it's feasible, I think it's necessary because of the fact that you're going to have people within the party and without. So we have to find a way to find that common ground, that common thread that holds us together and that we can build upon. So, for instance, the Progressive Independent Party, it is beginning to build quite like an umbrella, as it were. So, say, for instance, a place where, and we're in talks right now organizing this, but conceivably it would be an umbrella where all the different fractured third parties could come together and join forces to create a stronger foundation to be able to run candidates in a third-party situation. So you'd have the progressives, you'd have the Greens, you'd have the Libertarians, and not focusing on where we differ, but focusing where we're in common and building upon that, including our brothers and sisters who have chosen to stay within the Democratic Party so that we can build a coalition that absolutely will be a force to be reckoned with. So I absolutely do agree with both of them.
Okay. Okay, so we have a comment from Robert Jordan in our YouTube chat saying that people are being worked to death. Most don't have the time to do the research if the media does not tell us what the facts are. And I would second that. Like I hear a lot of people saying, do your own research. Now, when I went with my fiance down to her polling place for the primary, and we went through the list of different people who is running from different positions. Like there were some positions, there were 6 different people running from them, and you only had their own home websites to go to try and find out anything about it. And it still took us over an hour and a half after we've been given the ballot to actually go through each and every person before she could go in and, in just somewhat of a good conscience, vote for the people that she had decided to vote for. And this is a woman who works 1 job. So imagine if you're working 2.5 jobs, single parent, 3 kids. Like, how on earth are you going to get more involved? You're already working yourself to death. Who would like to take that one? Adair is seeming very impatient. Remember to unmute yourself, man.
All right. So here's the thing about that. I'm a student. I'm a student who has class for 16 hours a week. I'm a student who has about 50 hours a week in homework. I contribute to this show. I contribute to the podcast, Two Black Dudes, and I still find time to get involved in politics, to understand what's happening, at least at my local level, simply because this is the level that affects my daily life. The president doesn't really affect what goes on in my everyday, average, ho-hum life, but the people on my city council do, my state reps, my state senators do. If I want to be involved in the local party, most of the time they have 1 meeting a month at like 7:30, like from like 7 to 8 p.m. A lot of times you can go, you can bring your kids. It's a family-friendly environment. Also, go to your county auditor's website if you are looking for candidate information. In Washington, we're a little bit spoiled because they send it to us directly, but you can always go to your county auditor. You can get on that website, you can look up who's running. There should be a bio there because they have to be able to give people information. And if you're saying, well, hey, there's a lot of stuff going on, join your state party. If you can become a PCO and you spend 1 weekend a month, maybe if that, even going and door knocking, you spend 1, maybe 2 Saturdays for a couple hours of a Saturday at a meeting, voting on stuff, getting people in office in your state party that you're like, hey, you know, there's someone who agrees with where I'm coming from. That's how you get more involved. I mean, frankly, I get having a busy schedule. I get having a busy life. Like I said, I've got over 60 hours of commitments just from school. But I don't think there's any reason people should not be involved in politics, especially at the local level.
Okay, I would contend that as a person who has both worked full-time and as a person who's done studies at university while having kids, I would contend that a university schedule, while it is certainly work, there's a difference between doing homework at home, where you can take breaks on and off here and there, and then having to have work 2 to 3 minimum wage jobs just to make ends meet and constantly worry about whether or not your children are going to go to bed hungry. The amount of stress that puts on you, yeah. So I would definitely contend with that.
As a kid from that situation, though, I was a kid from a single-parent household where my mom and my dad both worked multiple jobs, where the idea of going to bed hungry wasn't exactly foreign. I get those concerns. I also understand that as a student, so a lot of my homework is in the lab, where I have to get it done as a science major. That's most of my time. Even then, my parents still took the time to sit down Again, in Washington, we're spoiled. You have this little packet that comes to you in the mail, and you pick it up and you read it, and you're like, hey, this is what's going on. If you're looking at local elections, the only resource these people have is your county auditor. Cell phones are prevalent these days. A lot of us can hop onto our county auditor website, take a look, here's what's going on, here's some information. Google these people. They're your local folks. People that run for city councils typically own a business in your area, and there's usually a news story or two about them. While I understand there's time commitments, I vehemently disagree, as a poor person, as a person from one of those situations, that it's impossible to be involved. You might not be able to be involved to the extent that those of us that were delegates are, and that's fine. That's understandable. No one's saying you have to put in 100 hours a week or attend every meeting or do all these other things.
Okay, Adair, you have to round it off now, man. Okay, fair enough. So we've been joined by Chad Lucas as well, and he is dying to get a comment in here. But Chad, I'm just gonna go around the table one more, and then one more time, then we'll throw it over to you.
All right.
So Dan, why don't we get your take on getting involved and being, well, not busy, but simply in a situation where the work rips you apart?
Okay, so I actually just attended the LD meeting because of another member inviting me to it, and my experience being at union meetings and my knowledge of Robert's rules a little bit has gave me a little bit of a leg up at the state convention, a couple of other, the King County convention, for example, and I was identified by other members of the LD and was actually like pressed into service. Lately, there's been talk about during the reorg, a lot of our officers are not going to seek re-election, and have had some encouragement to run for an officer position, vice chair, or whatnot. And it's very intimidating. I have 2 small kids. I work full-time. As you can see, I am currently getting into my car at the train station, but somehow, you know, I spoke to a woman at my LD who's been doing it for a very long time, and I told her my frustration about how much time it takes. You know, we got the monthly meetings, it's 2 hours a month, and she posited, she's like, look, I raised 2 kids doing this too. What kind of future are you going to make for your children? And that really sort of struck me. And they said, if you have challenges, we're here to help. You know, I'm like, well, my wife's got to watch the kids, and it's sort of stressful. We got a lot of things going on. She's like, well, maybe we can have babysitting at the meeting, and then more people could get involved. Like, people are totally willing to help us get involved, at least within the local party level. And it was a really warm welcome. At my first few meetings, there were some challenges with my credentials and being a dues-paying member, but it was people who were like Hillary people that helped me to get engaged. And there's been some contentious stuff that happens at the LD meetings. You know, I sort of pop off at the mouth sometimes, but despite it all,
No, not you.
through it all, at the end of the meeting, they're very welcoming, and they're very excited to have younger people in the party. And I feel like I'm just going along with the flow, and it's feeling really welcoming.
Okay. So, Sean, you were the one who started out by advocating strongly about getting engaged from the ground up. So why don't you take us to your conclusion here?
I absolutely agree. I was the one who started advocating for it. I'm the father of a 3-year-old little girl, full-time student, at least until I took a quarter off to volunteer with the Bernie campaign here, which I understand that a lot of people can't do financially. In fact, it ruined me, but that's another point entirely. My whole point is that just what you said. It took an hour and a half for you guys to do any sort of research to find out who to vote for, and I absolutely agree with you that an hour and a half time to somebody who's working 2 jobs, who has kids, who's in school, is a lot of time. But at some point we've got to start making priorities. And like I said before I even suggested getting involved in the party, is that we are the caretakers of this system. That was how the system was designed. That's how our corporate system is designed. If you don't like a corporation, you shouldn't spend money there. That's how our media system is designed. If you don't like the media that's coming out, you stop paying attention. They stop getting ad dollars. Well, what's happened is that the citizenry has fallen asleep at the wheel. And so you end up with a government that doesn't care what the people say, a media that says whatever they're paid to say, and corporations that do whatever they want, because there's no accountability. And there's not going to be any accountability in any of those three sectors until we start getting involved again. And so, yes, an hour and a half is a lot of time to do on research for something that you're going to spend 15 seconds checking boxes. That is a ridiculous amount of time, and I absolutely agree with you. But it is time well spent, because every minute that you spend actually researching one of these candidates and then going to these meetings and holding these candidates accountable is a minute that you are actually been involved in your democracy, and you're actually building a better world for your children. And the way I look at it is that, sometimes when I just sit around, I goof around on Facebook, I scroll through looking at pretty much nothing as a way to just get out of my head zone. What I found myself doing is I actually spend more and more time going to these political websites, going to politicians' pages, seeing what they're saying. And I know that not everyone has the time to go to every meeting, but a lot of our PCO positions, the precinct committee officer positions, were filled by C&E PCOs, which are Christmas and Easter CEOs, who showed up for the major events and not much else. And that's, that you can be involved on a very minimal level, but just being involved, you are doing more than the people who are sitting at home, who are wasting their time on Facebook. And I'm not trying to casting aspersions or any judgments on the people who aren't involved. What I'm saying is that we want you there. We want voices there, because we don't want to walk into a room where one guy knows what's going on and everyone else just kind of goes along with him because they think he knows what's going on. So, and that's more than often what happens at these meetings, is that one person stands up, talks about an issue that's happening, and then you vote on whether to give that thing an endorsement or not endorsement, or a candidate that endorsement or not endorsement. The more time that you spend doing research and getting involved, the more representative our government's going to be, and that's going to be difficult for a lot of people. But it has to become a priority. And like I said before, I don't care if you're doing it for the Green Party. I don't care if you're doing it for the Democratic Party. I don't care if you're voting for Jill Stein and you're being a part of the Democratic Party, but you might like a Republican senator. I don't care what your beliefs are. I want you to come and tell me about your beliefs so that we can actually make our society look more like what you think our society should look like, instead of what these big money interests who pay the politicians, who pay the media to report in a specific way, so that we can actually start molding our society back into what we want it to look like, instead of being told what it should look like.
Okay. I would still contend that during hard physical labor, 60 hours a week is something that leaves very little energy, and especially if you're part of a minority group, I could imagine that the added onerous of being part of that minority group, being part of being targeted by discrimination, not feeling safe on the street from cops, stuff like that, would impact that even more so. And then when you try and show up to vote, that you're being turned away, would again just tell you in so many different ways, they don't want me here. So why on earth would I fight to show up? That is at least my 2 cents on the perspective of the people who has given up on the political process. I'm in no way advocating that. If I was, I would not be sitting here working as hard as I can. But I'm going to turn it over to Dave to run the second half of this hour on this roundtable, and then we can also give some room for chat to get in here. And Dave, what are your 2 cents on what's been going on?
Well, I've been listening, and I'm really intrigued by this coalition idea. I think that definitely is the way forward. It's the way the other democracies work functionally in the world. Some of them that actually do work, it's done through coalitions. So hopefully that will be a way to break this two-party juggernaut that we're being completely overrun by. So I'm really glad that this conversation is continuing. And I have a question I want to throw out to everybody, this panel, and maybe Chad can maybe we can start out with Chad and have his reaction and as well as comment on what he's heard. But throw this out to all of you guys. Lauren Steiner last night said that she was looking forward to this watch party too with the Our Revolution broadcast. And there was some hesitance in some antipathy in her anticipation about what Bernie might say, because he's rather closed-lip about it, and she's worried that he's going to call for all of the delegates to get behind Hillary Clinton and get out there and work for her. And her answer to that is she's going to stop the stream and just basically walk out of the room. How would you guys react if Bernie on that stream that night says, listen, we really need to get behind Hillary, forget the third party, forget everything else, let's stop Donald Trump? And whoever wants to jump on then, if Chad, if you want to jump in, or
there's somebody talking. That's Dan, and your transmission is not good enough to hear, buddy. There we go.
Chad, I can hear you. Go for it.
Yeah, okay. So I understand her concerns. I know Lauren just through the internet, but I've worked with her online on a couple things. I understand her reluctance. I don't think Bernie's going to say that, personally. I don't think that he is that blind on the focus of the people who have been supporting him for the last year or more. At the same time, I will understand it if he does, because he's got priorities, and right now his priority is the November election, and it has to be, because he's a U.S. Senator and he wants to work with someone who can actually work with him rather than somebody he's going to be fighting with every step of the way. And from his personal perspective, I could understand that. I don't think that's going to be the focus of our revolution. For me, our revolution is stay engaged. However that works, wherever it works, whether it's the Democratic Party, the Green Party, it doesn't really matter as long as you stay engaged in what's going on in your communities, in your state, and around the country. Legislation doesn't stop just because we have a vote. And why are we all here? We're not here because we are surrounded by cults of personalities. We are here because we want to get stuff done. I'm here because I want single payer, and I will not stop until I see single payer signed by a president. And even then, I still have to hold him accountable, him or her, whatever. I hear in the earlier, before I was able to join, I heard so much about inside, outside party, and it just brought me back so much into the deja vu mode. It was rather incredible, because this is the exact same conversation that we had in 2004 and 2005. And there were people who, from the Kucinich campaign and the Dean campaign, who said, what do we do now? This party screwed us over, and we don't trust it, and we don't want to be involved in it. What do we do? And so it broke apart. It broke into defined segments that really didn't have a handle on what they were doing. There was Democracy for America, there was Progressive Democrats of America, there were a number of other smaller organizations that eventually filtered out. But there is an inside track. There is an inside strategy. There's also an outside strategy focused on more issues, focused on trying to build third-party candidates. And there never was a summit of the progressive leaders, either nationally or within state-level communities or whatever, that actually got anything going. We tried in Washington State. I was part of a group called Progressive Change for Washington, and it was getting together the leaders of the Green Party and the Progressive Party and all of the others. I've been to a couple of their meetings. all of the summits that I attended turned into shouting matches.
Well, that's the problem, isn't it, Chad? I mean, the all of these egos in the groups. I mean, we saw it starting last summer, and it continues. And that's the way it is. It's kind of the nature of this, is that all these individual groups try to come. They have all these ideas, and they can't really get together on any of them, so they stay separate. Right. So that's been the trend. How do we buck that trend? How do we keep an Occupy mentality and make us all under one umbrella?
By staying focused on things that we actually want to accomplish. And after an election, what we want to accomplish is legislation at the state level, at the national level, whatever. If we can identify things that we want to work together on, campaign finance reform, healthcare, bringing up a third party to be actually viable, things like that, we can work together on specific issues in our state capitals or in Washington, D.C., and those are the kinds of coalitions that Martin Luther King built. He didn't care what label somebody said. If they were willing to march with him, they marched with him, and he held their hand or linked arms or whatever. Those are the kinds of coalitions that we need to build. It doesn't matter what the label is. It matters what the goal is and how well we work together to accomplish that goal.
Okay, I want to bring Adair in here. He's rocking and he's got his hand up. It looks like he has to go to the bathroom.
I actually just have a chair that rocks, Dave. Thanks for that. But I agree with Chad, but I think, at least in Washington, we talk about this on a state level, and I think the rest of the delegates here would agree with this. I think we're in a unique position in Washington State to do that kind of bridge work that you were talking about, Chad, where we say we focus on the issues. But I also think that another thing to do there is for us to physically go and sit down and be like, hey, I was a national Bernie delegate for this 2016. I'm a Democratic PCO. I want to help you, whichever party group you might be going to, become a more viable candidate. Let's work together and build a coalition. Down in Olympia, people are talking like, well, hey, let's talk to a few people, pick some folks we want to run. It doesn't matter what label they run under. You can run under Democrat, you can run under Green. We have common issues, so we're going to help each other out. And I think those of us in Washington State as delegates are in a unique position because of the number of us that are PCOs, because of the bonds that we've built, because we're all across the state, can do that. We can go to those other party meetings and be like, hey, here's what's happening. We've got some delegates that have totally been like, I'm cutting ties, I'm joining this party. And so we can work with those delegates who have completely left that party to go to the Green Party or go to the Progressive Party or go wherever, because we have a built-in relationship with them. Like, hey, let's work together on these issues. Let's build this up as a coalition.
Hey, Adair, we've got somebody on the line on this call who doesn't have her hand up, who went through that. I'd like to bring Tambourine in to talk about the different faces that she dealt with when she came in as a candidate, because there were people within the party who welcomed her, and there were people within the party who gave her the finger and said, talk to the hand, I don't want to deal with it. So Tambourine, why don't you talk about the different faces that you dealt with when you decided to run for state senate?
Yes, I'd be happy to. When I got into this arena, mind you, I've never voted before, so already there was a prejudice against me, and basically the mindset is instead of focusing on, oh my God, how cool, you've never voted before, you're actually taking part and embracing me and making me feel a part of it. The attitude was that I was part of the problem, and moreover, when I announced that I was actually running for a Senate seat, the powers that be, and this is, I had wanted to comment on, piggyback on what Sean and Dan were saying in regard to the actual LD meetings and why it's so important if you are going to work within the Democratic Party, why it's so important to find the time to go to those meetings, because the establishment, those that, you guys kind of mentioned it in the stereotypical way of, the old ladies and the old men that have been there for decades, there's nothing wrong with them being there for decades, but here's the problem. When someone is so attached to the ways that things have been, and they are not open whatsoever to what the people are wanting it to become, then there's the problem. I represented that. I was a Bernie-crat going for this seat. And so in the 11th hour, on filing day, the committee woman of LD2 reached out to the Democratic incumbent, who was the senator for 20 years, the one who got unseated by the now Republican incumbent. She literally called Senator Marilyn Rasmussen and recruited her into the race so that a Bernie-crat would not take that seat. So we have been called troublemakers. We have been disrespected within those meetings, and the response to that is this, and I hope whoever is slightly interested and who is staying in the Democratic Party listens to this, because this is where your power is. We rallied, and this was I was doing a fundraiser for my campaign, and there must have been 50 people there, and we rallied the people to come and join the LD. And the next meeting, we rolled up there and we took over the meeting. And they happened to have been doing the endorsements that day. And whereas the previous meeting, when they were talking about bringing up for recommendation of endorsements for Inslee, for Murray, I had recommended to not endorse because of their position on the TPP, which I really hope we can talk about before this program is over, because it's very important that we talk about that. And I was shut down. I was told, when I told them the reason why is because, for example, Patty Murray, the unions, I said I was at the COPE convention and I saw that the unions were adamant about not endorsing Patty Murray because of her position on the TPP. Because obviously it is not for the people and it decimates the middle class. Now, I was shut down and said, I don't like the, here's the word, tone of where this is going. But the next meeting, when we rolled up, 30 deep, we had the power to overturn and shut down and reject the endorsement for Patty Murray, for Jay Inslee, and I believe one other, I can't remember who it was, but the point being that there's power in that. And Chad, thank you for bringing that up, because it's important. Because if someone comes, like the person that called in, and they don't have a lot of time, and they're coming into this meeting, and they're met with a brick wall and not made to be made to feel that they are welcome there, then that person walks out the door feeling disenfranchised and go back to their apathetic sleep, which doesn't help them, their family, or anyone else. So I hope that answers the question.
It answers part of it. The other half of the question was, there were people within the party who did welcome you and helped you and everything like that. So it wasn't universal. Right?
No, correct. So on the other side of the coin, absolutely. Actually, the chairwoman of the LD was and is a Hillary supporter. She was one of my biggest advocates. So yeah, in the name of balance, it is important to mention that. And that within that, we can learn that if we can find the common goal, because I'm not of the mindset that everyone who is for Hillary is some Satan spawn or some silly thing like that. We all are human beings, and in a common thread, at the end of the day, we all want mostly the same thing. So I think it's important for us to focus on what those common threads are and look for the alliances, even in groups who you may not agree with in other important situations.
Right. So Sean, you've had your hand up for a while. Why don't you unmute and give us your thoughts on this?
Well, I just wanted to go back to what Tambourine was saying about how she faced a lot of opposition getting in there and then she came in with a bunch of people, and they were able to change it. Well, like, part of the conversation has to be the people in power want to remain in power. It's just naturally, like, when you get to make decisions, you're going to want to make more decisions. Like, it's just how it works. People with money want more money because it's all directly related to power. And so they are afraid of having people come into their party and start taking away their voice. And so one of the things that we specifically dealt with at the DNC is that they turned off our lights, they turned off our crowd mics, they had white noise generators. Like, they very specifically did not want to hear from the Sanders delegates. I have to say that we actually pretty successfully made ourselves heard several different times throughout the convention. But at a very local level, that's the same thing. Like, the people in power are going to try and block you if they think that you're a threat to their power. And it's a good thing that Tambourine pointed out, because not everyone's like that. My LD has been absolutely wonderful to me. The one thing that I would say is that both the chair of the LD and the county chair of Spokane have both double-checked with me, triple-checked with me, quadruple-checked with me that I'm not going to be running against them numerous times. Like, they have made sure that, like, I'm not coming to take their power, which on one level I'm not. I'm not coming to get in there to change the conversation, as long as the conversation is what the conversation that I want to be having. And so far, it has actually been pretty well that we actually have been very, very progressive within Spokane, which is very surprising to me, based on what I knew of internal politics here. The Spokane is very progressive. So basically, my point is that their whole job is going to be to discourage you from coming back if they think you're a threat. And if they are doing that job of discouraging you, I understand why you'd want to turn away. But just like us national delegates at the Democratic Convention, you can't always just turn away and walk away, because what you're doing then is you're just giving the power to them freely, which is exactly what they want. So what I really think that you should do is, if you are starting to feel that discouragement, reach out to other members that you have noticed that they're doing that to, and try and build your own internal coalitions and try and, like, bolster each other, because really at the end of the day, you belong there. Like, it's a public meeting. They shouldn't be able to kick you out. They shouldn't be able to turn your lights off or your mics off or discourage you to the point where you should want to turn away. And if they're doing that, then you have a responsibility to point that out and say that this is not right. This is a public forum. This is part of my government. I want to be a part of my government. I want my voice to be heard. So that's exactly what I'm saying. Is that if you're being discouraged, that is all the more reason to try and stay. And I know it's very, very difficult. I know a lot of the people at the National Convention felt that they weren't wanted there at all, which was kind of true. And yet we're still going to be around, because we know that we are actually getting our voices heard now that they see us as a threat.
Yep. All right, well, we're coming up at the top of the hour here, so let's. It looks like we lost Dan. Looks like he dropped out. But just some final thoughts on the convention, the way forward. Just 60 seconds, everybody. Let's start with Tambourine.
Unmute, love.
In regard to the convention, you said?
Just 60-second final comments. Way forward. Green, no green. What's your take?
Me personally, what I experienced at the convention was nothing less than a psychological and mental warfare there in regard to the progressive leg of the Democratic Party not being heard and being completely disrespected. I think that is definitely the root of why those who are inspired to promote a third party should absolutely go where their inspiration is, because until we do that, there will never be any escape from that two-party monopoly.
Well, I was inspired by the town hall last night. Sean, 60 seconds. Unmute.
Sorry, Dan. So my takeaway from the convention is that a lot of the delegates have had trouble recuperating from the convention itself. I've noticed a lot of people talking about how it's really kind of got them down. And I think that's going to happen when you have a group of really empathetic people who are all being told that that no one wants to hear what they're saying, that no one wants to hear their ideas, and that their candidate just doesn't deserving of having any time to speak. So I think that it really actually caused a lot of damage within the party. So going forward, I definitely think it's going to be that coalition between third parties and between people who are going to stay in the Democratic Party. I think that our revolution is going to be instrumental. I know earlier you talked about what if Senator Sanders gets out tonight or on the 24th and says, we need to support Hillary Clinton. Well, I know that that's going to really push a lot of people away, and I really feel that he's not going to do that, because that would essentially split the party. That's gonna have some pretty dramatic effects on the party for the people who chose to stay. So I think that we're going to use our revolution to actually make a difference going forward. One of the things that I'm interested in is actually building a caucus within each of the parties that's focused on getting money out of politics.
Nice.
And getting universal health care and those sort of things, because there are Republicans that agree with us that if they were to build a caucus within their party, we have a caucus focused on that in our party, and then we could actually work across the aisle for those very specific goals.
Great. Excellent. Listen, Dan, looks like I got a connection with Dan finally. Dan, we're just wrapping things up here at the top of the hour. Let's give you a couple minutes to for your final comments and your thoughts about the convention and the way forward. Unmute yourself.
So in terms of the convention, I think this is probably, when people ask me how the convention affected me, I say my canned answer is life-changing with no hyperbole. The witnessing the spectacle and the glamour and the media manipulation that occurred at the convention was a little bit... it confirmed a lot of suspicions that I already had. When I was younger, I participated in the WTO riots in the city of Seattle, and I witnessed some of this media manipulation as well as a young man, and it sort of started me down a very negative path and turned me away from politics, frankly. And it's interesting now that I'm older and I'm witnessing sort of the same tactics, the same tired sort of manipulation of the message to the end of the powers that be. It still just galvanizes me even further to enact change locally within the system and enact change of the establishment. Being a newcomer, I experienced this very same thing at work. I work in a union shop. I'm a lead mechanic for King County Metro, and the establishment is very strong. You know, we've done things for 30 years. And to that, I still say, okay, well, let's try something new. And, you know, you get a little bit of pushback, you deal with it, but as long as you stay firm and as long as you're strong in your convictions and as long as you think through very carefully the small little incremental changes within the power structure, you can enact very sweeping changes just by virtue of the established people carrying your effort. Nobody can do this by themselves.
Yeah, live better, work union.
You know, and you spread the load, right? And
yeah, exactly. Well, that's the whole concept.
Right. So we could try. You know, I really like the idea of Sean's caucus about reaching across the aisle, identifying maybe more moderate members of other parties to build a coalition to enact the change that the people truly need.
Right. Well, okay, Adair, final thoughts from you, Adair, 60 seconds, and then we'll throw it back to Nis for the second hour. What do you think? Coalition seems to be the big theme.
I would agree with it. I think a coalition really is necessary in today's politics if you really want to enact any formal change. People are too beholden to the idea of party identity politics in particular. But I also want to say that as a person of color in America, what I experienced at the convention was America just condensed. And I want to say something about that. To all my other people of color out there watching right now, we need to come together. regardless of our individual ethnicities, and work together. But also understand they couldn't stop us before, they aren't stopping us now, and they're not going to stop us in the future when we actually put our collective communities together and march into politics. And I think the louder we are, the better off we're going to be as a community.
Very good. Well, it's a great discussion, guys. Thank you all for joining us for this first hour. The struggle continues as well as the revolution. So we look forward to see what happens with Bernie Sanders' speech. But no matter what happens, I think we all could agree that we have to find the issues that really give us passion and get us out the door and get us changing this country. So thanks, everybody. Nis, if you're ready to jump back in, I know Chad is still here. Adair, I don't know who all is going to hang out for the second hour, but we're going to do a little news and dig a little deeper into some of the news items that are on everyone's minds, including Louisiana flooding and the closing of hopefully the closing of private prisons across the country, a wave of private prisons closures. Yeah, right. We'll see. Nis, I see you unmuted.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for
a shot to come up. I know.
To get a word in edgewise.
Eric's having tech nightmares. I feel your pain, brother.
It's been really great listening to the second half of the first hour here. So I just wanted to give Chad his opportunity for a 60-second round-off before we completely leave behind the roundtable.
Well, I mean, I've spoken on this show quite a bit, and I've spoken on other shows quite a bit as well. I am staying within the party. I'm very comfortable there. I've got lots of friends there, people from the last generation that came in 1968, and they've been fighting for 40 years. And what they told me at the convention is something that I really want to pass on, and that as we pushed things as hard and as far as we could for as long as we could, we need your energy to keep it going, because we know you're going in the right track. We are going beyond their comfort zones, but there's a lot of them who understand that, and they are comfortable with letting us take the wheel. We just need to step forward and prove that we can do it. Another thing that I want to say in response to something that Sean put out is everybody needs to understand the rules that we're operating under. Party rules or legislative rules, the law, things like that. If you're going to try to affect a decision, you need to understand the language of that decision and focus on changing that language the correct way. Look at your bylaws, look at the endorsement rules, look at the standing rules, understand not just what they say but where they came from, because that puts you in a position to be able to change them with a solid foundation. If you go in and you expect to just change things without understanding what came before, it's not going to be an easy time. It might succeed, it might fail, but it's not going to be easier. It is much easier if you understand the foundation that you're standing on and build from there. So that's my 60 seconds.
Okay. So I really think that these kind of roundtables are quite unprecedented, because when you watch normal national news and you see the political insiders tone in on the screen, none of them actually speaks candidly about their own experiences within the party machines. No one speaks candidly about how the sauce is made, legislative-wise, endorsement-wise, and stuff like that. And I really appreciate having you, even though you're only delegates, I really appreciate having you come on and forthrightly speak candidly about your experiences within the machine, and I hope that you'll continue to do so, even as you most likely will progress in your political endeavors. So to Tamarine Borelli, Dan Sanson, and Sean Comfort, thank you so very much for joining us on such short notice for a great roundtable. Hope you'll come back later and talk about even more issues as they develop. Lord knows the news segment has a lot of them. So if you want to take a couple of seconds to say goodbye, the floor is yours.
I guess I'll go. I really appreciate the opportunity to just share some thoughts with everyone and interchange them between all of us. I think it is crucial for all of us to stay in the conversation and to reach beyond whatever differences anyone may have in regard to the ultimate goal, and that's actual change and not just the idea of one. So if anyone is interested, please go to electionjusticeusa.org as well as watchthevoteusa.com, and you can find information on how you can get involved and what is the next move to make sure that our elections, that we're putting people in that we're actually voting for, because until we secure that, it doesn't matter who is going to vote for who. It matters who's counting the votes. So please go to those sites and get some more information and get involved. And again, thank you for having me.
And for me, thanks very much for this opportunity to speak. It's been it gets quite therapeutic talking about the DNC with people that actually care about it. My wife sure is tired of hearing me complain about what happened. My kids are starting to roll their eyes. But this is I can't encourage you more. There are multiple secretaries of state across the United States websites that will tell you what your local legislative district is. Get active. Go to a meeting. It's usually once a month. And if you can't, what's the great about the going to the meeting on an intermittent basis, even, you know, this past week I met Chris Rakedahl, who's a candidate for the office of superintendent of public instruction in Washington State. You will get to meet the people that you will vote for, and when you speak one-on-one with these candidates, that blows all the candidate statements and websites away, and you can build up your library within your brain of who you want to vote for at the next election, and it's been a wonderful experience so far.
Okay, thank you both for joining us. We won't have the opportunity to have Sean give final words. He had to leave in a hurry, unfortunately. But thank you very much, and I'm glad that we could help you with a free therapy session, Ben. So I gotta say, for myself, the convention was not surprising, but still heartbreaking. So I know exactly, not exactly, but to some extent, I know what you're talking about. Covering it day after day, what was just heartbreaking, and actually seeing delegates being completely ignored by the media. Not a single Sanders delegate interviewed by mainstream national media, even after they went out to occupy the media tent. It was insane. So yeah, okay, in any case, we have to move beyond this conversation. Thank you very much for joining us. We are now going into the news segment. I'm going to start straight out with the Louisiana flooding. The Louisiana flooding were estimates made between August 8th to August 14th, 6.9 trillion gallons of water fell on Louisiana, with especially high concentration in areas such as Watson and Livingston Parish. Over 20 parishes or counties have been declared disaster areas and received emergency disaster declaration by President Obama, but more are also seeking the same status. The frequency of a flood this size is roughly 1 every 500 years. But changes to the climate have made these 500-year rainfalls more common recently, with 8 surrounding this level in the past year alone. The estimated cost of the flood so far is $30 million and expected to rise as time goes on, and the full extent of the damage, as the full extent of the damage is discovered. So far, as of early today, there had been 13 deaths confirmed, more than 40,000 homes destroyed. Many of these homes lack flood insurance due to the fact that they are not on a traditional floodplain. Over 30,000 people have been rescued, over 1,900 pets have been rescued, and over 7,000 people are in emergency shelters. There are some opinions that climate change will require an actual redrawing of what is right now designated as floodplains in America, which governs whether or not a person is eligible for FEMA flood insurance. However, that is only done every 10 years and cannot account for the increase in extreme weather conditions. Currently, FEMA, the Red Cross, the Coast Guard, and the National Guard are all in Louisiana, and they are all asking, and the Red Cross is asking for donations. And you can volunteer to help at volunteerlouisiana.gov. Now, I would at the same time like to point out that the mainstream media for the first many days did not in any way, shape, or form report on this. You could not find it on CNN, MSNBC, ABC, or Fox. You could find it on local news in Louisiana. They quite naturally cannot ignore such an occurrence. But it was actually completely and utterly ignored by the national media. It wasn't until social media that articles about what was happening in Louisiana was so prevalent on social media that the national medias would look completely incompetent if they did not report on it. That they reported on it. I don't know why. Maybe natural disasters on the scale of Hurricane Sandy doesn't qualify anymore as good news. But in any case, Brandon, you've been sitting and being very patient with all these delegates having the floor. You put together this briefing document for me. Why don't you tell me your thoughts on the different sources you've been gathering this data from? What's your thoughts on what's happening in Louisiana and response to it?
Well, Louisiana is one of the poorest countries. I mean, one of the poorest states in the United States. And when you talk about you're talking about volunteer, also tragedy fatigue or disaster fatigue, or any sort of fatigue that happens when people are constantly inundated with news of disaster or war or any of these sort of like these big crises. Like, people become acclimated to it. So at a certain point, yes, this may be the biggest rainfall, the biggest natural disaster since Sandy, but it's just no longer newsworthy. Like you see the same thing with mass shootings now, where like unless it's a really, really big one, people don't care. Like there's always that danger that if it bleeds, it leads, but if it bleeds every day, you got to find something that bleeds a lot more. So there's always that danger of people just tuning out automatically because like, oh, another disaster in Louisiana at that. So it's impossible not to think back to Katrina and the way that was mishandled, and so it just becomes just another disaster. So part of how you get over that is you personalize it. You put these personal narratives of these people who have lost their homes, lost their families out into the media through Facebook, through social media, and that's the way you engage people now. Otherwise, you're just going to have a bunch of people thinking, oh, another disaster.
Yet another reporter standing in the rain with wet, soggy pants. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, this is one of the 8. I mean, this is one of 8 major rainfalls this year. There's tornadoes going on. It's just become that sort of thing. It's tragedy fatigue. So, what do you do?
Yeah, I remember the same thing happening with pictures from poor rural areas in Africa. When I grew up, like the first times we saw these pictures of children where you could see the ribs protruding and stuff like that. I remember like there were record-breaking donations to the Red Cross and to all sorts of NGOs trying to help out down there, and record-breaking numbers of people volunteering to go help. And then there was another hunger, and then there was another civil war, and then another hunger, and another natural disaster, and then yet another civil war, and another dictator, and another, and at some point people just started going, oh well, and
because at a certain point you don't tackle the structural causes of it. People tune out, and I mean I can't. It's the human. At a certain point, you have to actually start tackling the structural causes of these problems and start building an infrastructure that can withstand these, this sort of thing. So you talk about having community meetings organized by the state government, not the federal government, so communities know how to effectively prepare for this kind of rainfall. Though how you prepare for this kind of rainfall, that's just not possible, obviously. But you talk about building houses with foundations that can stand this kind of flooding. You talk about plans, the community meeting place, having floodlights available for in your house. So there is that level of the state government, the community need to take back the initiative in order to make these effective plans. But there's also the case to be made for dealing with climate change and dealing with the sort of the underlying cause of all these extreme weather events and trying to prevent more or mitigate the damage that has been done by actively, curtailing carbon emissions and all these other sort of problems that we have.
Okay. Well, moving off of Louisiana and the enormous tragedy that is transpiring in one of the poorest states in the country, we have some news in the ways of justice. We're going to start with the Justice Department. The DOJ has said that it is going to phase out the use of private prisons. And according to Fortune magazine, the same day that they announced that, CCA, Correctional Corporation of America, I believe it stands for, took a hit of 40% of their stock value disappearing. Now, a lot of people are seeing this as, 40% of their stock value disappeared overnight, they're done. Well, unfortunately, that's not, or fortunately, depending on who you are, that's not how stocks work. Stock is simply, it does not affect the business ability to conduct its business directly. It can affect it indirectly, such as its reputation taking a hit, so it's harder for them to get a loan, or they get loans at higher interests than they usually do, or it can affect them if there is someone wants to do a hostile takeover of them. Now it's easier to do that. So it can affect them in those areas, and it can also affect them that the stockholders can sue them, the board, for mismanagement, stuff like that. But it does not result in the business going under necessarily. Those kinds of things happens in businesses that are based on loans, that are based solely on reputation, like in the banking crisis. But the Intercept, Alice Sperry, is reporting on this. It's a great piece issued at 3:53 p.m. today that I can highly recommend that you go take a look at. She does, however, raise an important question, which is that the CCA and other for-profit prisons use the Department of Homeland Security's Immigration and Custom Enforcement, or ICE, or ICE. They still have contracts with them. So whether or not ICE will follow suit, they have not addressed as of yet. The Deputy Attorney General, Solly Yates, wrote in her memo on her decision that private prisons simply do not provide the same level of correctional services, programs, and resources, do not save substantially on cost, and do not maintain the same level of safety and securities as facilities operated by the Bureau of Prisons. So those are some of the reasons. I would have hoped that human rights would have been among the reasons, but we'll live to fight another day. In any case, as goes criminal justice, I believe this is a blow. How big a blow do you think it is? Adair, Brandon, you guys want to come in here? Brandon?
Yeah, sure. I think that it's a good start. I think that mostly, though, we have to tackle this this epidemic of detaining so we're not only detaining undocumented workers, but we're detaining people seeking asylum and refugees. So what people don't know is that those Central American children and women who came a few years ago to America and it caused a big hoopla seeking asylum, which America is supposed to provide, and we have laws for that. They are not immigrants, they are refugees. They also go to these detention centers. They're also housed in these inhumane conditions for long periods of time. And so I think that a lot of this speaks to the dehumanization of criminals within our society, and also to the criminalization of not only immigrants but just brown people coming across the border, because it's not simply immigrants. This is asylum seekers. So at a certain point, tackling the private prison, industrial complex, because just non-private prisons are also just hellholes, comes down to tackling the culture of our culture's view on crime and criminals, and saying that they're criminals, but they're still humans. They deserve to have human rights. They deserve to have human decency, respect, food, water, decent living conditions. Because otherwise, what is our justice system for? If it's for punishment, that's one thing.
Let me interject a question here. So, you have a very valid critique of the existing prison system, especially maximum security prisons facilities are insane in the way that they're designed. But with the private prison system, if that gets taken out of the equation vis-a-vis the criminal justice element, won't that be allowed sounding that a person is not a piece for profit, that you cannot jail people simply for profit, that it is not okay to lobby politicians or judges or cops to up the rate of convictions just so that you can make more money?
Absolutely. So that's one thing that don't often get talked about when we talk about private prisons, is the sort of cyclical nature of our legal system and the way they lobby lawmakers. They give what essentially legalized bribes to judges to increase sentencing. The way they basically write certain laws. A lot of our immigration laws right now, a lot of our drug laws right now are the result of private prison lobbying in order to get fill bunks, fill beds, because that's the sort of the state is required to fill a certain number of beds in a private prison, and so or else they pay a fee. So they increase this quota. Private prisons basically just have a quota, the same way police would have a quota, and the state has to sort of deal with that in that metric. So they go after the most vulnerable population. So yeah, it comes part of that, part of your equation right there, part of your scenario is getting people to recognize other people within American society as just that, people. Recognizing immigrants or undocumented workers as people, recognizing minorities as people, recognizing people who use drugs, whether they be addicts or of heroin or opiates, or just the casual marijuana smoker, as people, and not just criminals who deserve what they get, because that's really what our society is built around. We have a very punitive justice system. It's not about rehabilitation. It's not about making the streets safer. It is about punishment and retribution for what people have. People have offended society's standards. So that's really just the point. We have to start looking at criminals as people and stop looking at brown people as criminals. It's that dynamic that allows for a lot of these laws to get passed that they don't just affect black people and brown people. They might affect them disproportionately, but we don't talk about how many young white people go to jail simply because these drug laws exist and are unfair. It may be a smaller number, but there are still plenty of people who are going to jail.
Yeah. Yeah, like that's another form of capital that minority people have been, people of minorities have been the past decades, is they're not just for-profit quotas, they're also quotas for political achievement, so that a mayor who wants to get elected puts pressure on the police department to have a better conviction rate so that he can have a better chance of re-election. So as long as that's also going on, the price of life is is very low. So fortunately, we do have some. We actually managed to take some pretty good news and put a pretty negative spin on it, saying that it wasn't enough. But it is actually good news. I just want to put a big fat line under that. It's a good first step. There are many, many, many more steps that needs to be taken, but this is a good first step.
Absolutely. I mean, we can separate this into two things, like the actual reality of what's happened, which is, okay, this is not that big of a dent within the private prison industry because of, most of their contracts are with DHS, Department of Homeland Security, ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, but there's also the perception. They did take a 30+% hit to their stock prices, which to the vast majority of people is going to signal that there is something, that this industry is failing, that there's something wrong with it, that it's not in line with modern sensibilities. And so hopefully that has an effect. So, there's perception and there's reality. And I think that most people are going to be taken by the perception that this is a failing industry. And they're going to have to, they're going to have to try to overcome that when they seek just the casual investor.
Yeah. Okay, if you're joining us, my name is Nis Pedersen, and I am the co-host and co-founder of Project Sanity. With me today is Dave Coennen and Brandon and Adair Schmidt. Earlier today we had a roundtable with four former national delegates for Bernie Sanders, talking about the way forward after the convention, and as progressives, as Democrats, as third-party people. Right now we are doing the news and commentary on it. If you are watching us on Twitch or one of the two people there, or you're watching us on the Benjamin Dixon Show channel, just know that we have created our own YouTube channel called Project Sanity. You can find it by typing in YouTube/Project Sanity, or by typing in projectsanity.org. You can find us at Project Sanity on Twitter. You can become a member of Project Sanity and help contribute by doing stories or finding stories others have done by going to our Google Plus community, which is very originally named Project Sanity. So go there, join the community where others are discussing the daily news, helping each other find news. We go there to look every week for news that we put in our show. If you want to help in other ways, you can contact us. You can contact me on Nis Pedersen at projectsanity.org. And the same goes for Richard Green at projectsanity.org, Dave Coennen at projectsanity.org, and so on and so forth. First name, last name of anyone who works with us, and then at projectsanity.org. As always, every article, every piece that we have named or used in the show, you can find in the video description, and everyone who has contributed to the show, you can also find down there. Did you want to say something, Brandon?
I did. I just wanted to comment briefly on the way forward, because I didn't get the chance to talk because I'm not a delegate of anything, because I live in New York City, so I don't think that would have possibly worked out. But no, I just think that at a certain point, if you're unwilling to leave or even threaten to leave, you're just unable to hold someone accountable within this system. Like, if you are going to vote for Clinton regardless, I understand why you might do that, but I don't understand how you could possibly consider yourself to be able to hold her accountable, nor I don't think that is somehow the pragmatic or adult decision. I think that is the naive decision to be. I hate to go the no, you're the naive one route, but at a certain point, it's just like what is your leverage? The same people who are that I would have the same question for people who are staying in the party. What is your leverage if you will do what they say regardless? Like, what is your if you're not forcing them to come to you, if you decide to stay, I can understand that. That's completely up to you. But to pretend like you have some kind of leverage is a misinterpretation of something. I don't know what that would possibly be. I can understand, from my perspective, if you're going to build a coalition, which I totally agree with, make them come to you. Make them earn that vote. Make them say, okay, here's how we are going to appeal to your sensibilities in a proactive way, whether it means courting green voters, independents, socialists, whatever, or just progressive Democrats. But that's not what we have here. We have people who are pledging their votes, but beforehand, and saying we're gonna hold their feet to the fire afterwards. Which, in my opinion, is that's not a good way to be with your president. That's an antagonistic relationship with your elected official. In that situation, you have an antagonistic relationship with your elected official, and that's not what I want. I want to have a president who I can support. I want to have a Bernie Sanders type president who I have to be engaged because I need to help him defend himself against the moneyed interest. I don't want a president who is just looking to cheat, and as soon as I take my eyes away, they're going to start. That's. I agree with Adair. It's not impossible to be engaged in politics, but I think it's unreasonable for someone with 9. That's why we have a republic, right? That's why we have a democratic republic. Because it's not impossible. I work out 2 hours a day. It's not impossible to do that if you have no life other than going to work and then working out. But it's unreasonable for most people. It's unreasonable to assume that people have enough time to spend 9 to 5 at work if they only have one job. And so in overtime. So let's be honest. You got travel, you got overtime. So let's say you wake up at 7, you get to work at 9 or whatever. You get home by 7. You have what? No family. You're gonna spend the next 12, 3 hours a day catching up on news, sifting through sources. It's unreasonable. I think, in my opinion, we have a republic. We need to stop normalizing the fact that our politicians are inept, corrupt, lazy, and just generally liars. And start saying, okay, I'm electing people who I can trust. But
Okay.
that's my opinion, because I've worked a full-time job before as well, and it's people who are like, oh, you should be. It's like no. Like I want to go on dates. I want to go on dates. I want to hug my family. I want to I don't want to be annoyed at work and to be annoyed at home. People deserve to have that, and even if they don't deserve it to have it, it's reasonable to assume that they're going to want that. And so
we need to stop having it to be fires that need to be put out before we pay attention. Adair is exploding here in the background. He really wants to get in here. I can see.
I didn't even say anything that was that offensive. All I said was I think if we're going to build a coalition, it has to be one that demands to be courted. Not one that pledges ahead of time.
Would you liken it to a domestic abuse relationship? Like you said, if you don't threaten to leave, if you're not willing to make good on it, then
no, I would threaten it to any relationship, whether it be domestic or financial or you just hiring somebody. Accountability means basically to hold someone to account to what they do by being able to get them to stop or to modify their problematic behavior. If you can't get them to modify their problematic behavior, you're not holding them accountable. You're whining. You're doing ineffectual whining at worst, and at best you're just informing people of what's going wrong in order to assuage your guilt for supporting them, which is fine, but that's not accountability.
Mm-hmm.
I think people have gotten Stockholm syndrome from 8 years of holding Obama accountable by reporting his drone program. That's not accountability. He never stopped. Holding someone accountable is my wife is cheating on me, either she stops or I leave her. My employee is not doing his job properly, either he starts or I fire him. That's accountability. Accountability is not, I recognize you're doing this bad thing.
But the politician seems to have worked out that it doesn't matter what kind of bad things they do. If they disengage the public enough and make everything stink enough so that no one cares anymore, then they get reelected anyway.
Yeah, and that's why. But that can only function in a closed system like we have now, where you have both parties colluding to make everything as obtuse and hard to follow as possible. And that's my main critique against the whole Supreme Court of the United States argument. Like, okay, we need to hire Hillary. Sorry, I said hire Hillary. We need to accept Hillary because she'll appoint a moderate judge and not a crazy one. But the only reason the Supreme Court is so powerful in America, which it should not be, is because our Congress is so inept and so incapable of legislating that the only way anything vaguely socially progressive gets through or doesn't get through is with the Supreme Court. Like, come on now. Let's be honest. If our Congress could do their job properly, so a new Supreme Court justice would not be a big deal because they could just overturn it. That's how checks and balances work. Unfortunately, for example, the Voting Rights Act should have been redone and passed by now, but they just can't agree on it. So I can't. People are so willing to normalize things that should not be normalized, or to artificially put artificial boundaries on the conversation, so that you can describe Clinton as the first woman from a major political party to be nominated in an almost fair election, or the most progressive platform ever if you only look in the past 20 years within the past two parties. It's like all these asterisks that have to be added behind everyone's statement just to make them true. But let's go back to the news. I'm sorry, I got off on a tangent. So just I apologize.
Okay. I think we need to get Adair in here before his chair breaks.
Holy God, I don't know where to start.
Project Tangent.
I mean, so first of all, Brandon, getting involved is how you hold people accountable.
Okay,
you don't have to go to every meeting. That's why we have PCOs. That's why I have volunteered my time to go outside and knock on every door in my precinct and say, hey, guys, here's what's going on. Do you have any questions? What candidates are you thinking of voting for? What can I do to make this experience
you keep
better?
not answering the question about if a person is working from 5 a.m., gets up 5 a.m., puts the kids to school, and then gets off to work and isn't back home again until 7. Then you have to cook dinner, put the kids to bed. Then it's 9 p.m.
You work on the weekends most of the time? Do most people work weekends?
We're talking here about the working poor and the lower middle class. How on earth are they ever going to get engaged?
They can get engaged, and they do get engaged when you have a system like PCOs. When PCOs do their job, you don't actually have to leave your home if your PCO is doing their job. If you get someone, if there's one person in your community who's like, you know what, this stuff sounds kind of cool. You folks watching at home, if you think this stuff sounds kind of cool and you're really lamenting, like, man, people aren't engaged, and you have the time to sit up there and say, you know what, I'm gonna go to one of the local meetings. I showed up. I was told, hey, you're gonna be the PCO for your precinct. You know what I do on a lot of my weekends when I have the time, when I'm not in school or trying to find work or running around for another function? We have a delegate thing that we're going to Rock Against the TPP up in Seattle, where I'm supposed to be tomorrow, which is a whole 45-minute drive away. I walk around my neighborhood. I knock on individual doors and I say, what can I do to make the process better for you? How can I bring this to you? How can I help you as your PCO? I'm there to make sure you can get.
But now you're in a situation where your PCO.
Tacoma.
But Adair, imagine you're in a situation where you don't have a PCO, where there isn't someone there to do the job. Or let's just say that you're fed up with the Democratic Party and you don't want to hear anything they have to say. But there's no system like what you're talking about for third parties. Like
there is.
So address that.
There are third-party systems. There are third-party PCOs. There are Green Party PCOs in the state of Washington who will go to your door. And a lot of times, again, I hear no reason why, for 1 weekend out of a month, for 1 or 2 hours, with people who are happy to give you whatever you need to make sure you can come up. I promise you, these parties, these local, like right in your neighborhood parties, are desperate for people to show up and will work with you in any way possible to make it feasible for you to show up. Childcare. They'll help you feed your kids while you're there. It's a couple of hours.
Okay, so Adair is
I get that
absolutely
people have
right.
to work, but no, there's no reason. You want to hold people accountable, you have to get involved. You have to vote. You have to know who's running.
Okay.
And you do it from the bottom up, Brandon. You do it from the bottom
Okay,
up.
okay. I can agree with you. There are people who do what you do all over America. That's exactly what I say, but that's not really my point. My point is that the entire political system, the way it is structured now, is unless you are into that kind of thing, unless you are doing what we do right now, is unreasonable to, especially with the inundation of so much media and so many different opinions inside. It is very unreasonable to expect people to be engaged to the point in which they can hold people's feet to the fire consistently, especially if they're poor, especially if they have jobs, especially if they have kids, especially if they just don't want to do that sort of thing.
If
Like,
you
it
just
just-
don't want to do it,
Just tired to the core of their
Yeah.
soul. There
if
is
you just
there
don't want
is a
to-
house.
that's a personal problem.
There.
That's a personal problem.
There is a house. There is a house on my street where there's a woman who has 5 kids living in that house. Now, at least once a week, I see her sit out on her porch with her head in her hands, sobbing.
Welcome to how I grew up.
Yeah,
I'm talking.
I'm just saying it's unreasonable to expect her to even conceive of the notion that she is empowered to change things in the long term. When you are putting out fires, or when you have given up putting out fires because everything around you is simply burning no matter what you're doing, how on earth are you going to get the hope and the optimism needed for you to actually believe that anything you can do can change your situation?
I grew up being like in a neighborhood where we routinely got shot at. I grew up in a family on food stamps, on public assistance. I remember Bill Clinton getting kicked out of our nice apartment, moving to the projects, and living through that, and still, to this day, having to deal with the ramifications of both being poor and black in this country. That if you choose not to be engaged, if you make the conscious choice, I don't want to be a part of this because I don't see the point, then there is nothing that anybody can do to help you.
Okay, well,
Period.
okay.
The
So
thing
I think
that I'm saying is you want to
Okay,
change.
so-
You want to change something. You want to know how your politician voted? Hop on your phone, pull up the Google, type in the person's name and their voting record, and bam, those things are public record. Did they vote the way I wanted them to? No. If they didn't, vote for the next person in the primary.
How
Vote
are
for
you
the
supposed
challenger.
to
There
know
are
that?
things that can
Okay.
be done that take 2
Then
seconds.
you need to read each and every piece of legislation to actually be
You don't
able
have to
to.
read each and every piece of legislation.
We can talk about what people are theoretically.
I want to address this. Adair, if a person's voting record is supposed to mean something to you, then you need to know what it is that person voted for or against, which means that you need to know each and every piece of legislation that person voted for or against.
When you run these searches, they have a list. It tells you right at the bottom.
Please don't cut me off. Political major students don't know these things. Why do you expect a high school dropout, mother of 7, to be able to know these things?
Because there's no reason not to. Period.
There is.
No, there's not. No matter who you are in this country.
Okay,
I refuse to believe there's any reason to not be engaged, especially because most people in this country that tend to be poor are disproportionately people of color. The fact of the matter is, people were poor back in the 60s. People were poor in the 60s. When they went out, they did everything they could to make sure people had the right to vote. Don't squander that. Don't sit up here and give me this idea that, well, you know what, I don't have to know, I shouldn't know. There's no reason not to know. There's no reason not to get involved, to understand that, guess what, my best shot of getting out of these BS policies that have been keep being put in place is to get active. Period. I've done it. I've been there. I've lived that. I continue to live it.
But you are not.
I think it's my turn. It's my turn. I think you're the exception that proves the rule, as opposed to what is possible. I think you're Obamatizing yourself. You're making this like, well, I did it, so everyone can. But people aren't making a cut. Everyone can, but not everyone could, but not everyone can, and that's the difference. Everyone could learn about nutrition and eat healthy. It's not an issue of money. It's not an issue of access to information. But not everyone will. Not everyone does. Not everyone has the theoretical capability of doing pretty much anything. But due to social conditions, due to material conditions, due to personal conditions, all we can do is meet people where they're at. We can't cajole them by saying that you don't have your problems aren't legitimate. Your problem, like I had those same problems.
I'm not saying the problem. What I'm saying is that
you're saying with enough willpower. You're saying with enough willpower, you can overcome anything.
Stop cutting people off as they're talking.
You're saying with enough willpower, you can do anything, and I agree. Unfortunately, that's just not the reality of what people are dealing with. People aren't dealing with that. Not everyone has that, and that's why we need representatives. That's why we need people like you, people like me, people like Bernie Sanders, people like Lawrence Steiner, who like the exceptional people who can go out and say, I have empathy for these people. I will go the extra mile. I will stay up all night researching this stuff so that someone with 3 kids who's depressed, who doesn't have access to medication, does not have to. We will drag them into the light. Like we will help them. Unfortunately, we have a political leadership who does not have that empathy.
But here's what I'm saying, man. No, go ahead, finish.
No. I mean, and so that's my point. It's like yes, people could theoretically do these things, but a lot of them can't for so many different reasons that range from completely illegitimate, like I forgot to vote, to completely illegitimate. Like my job would not give me the day off, and if I don't work today, for both of my jobs, from 9 to 9 or 9 to 12, I won't get paid, and I can't afford my medication. And so it's not up to me or anyone to call someone's excuse illegitimate. It's just up to me to go, okay, well, I'm going to offer you solutions, realistic ones, and if you can't do it, give me your story. I'll speak. I will help you. I will help give your voice. Get your voice heard. But it's like that. It's just. I mean, I was a personal trainer for a long time, and there are so many people who want to do it, but they just can't for whatever reason. And it's not just about politics. This is about the human condition in life, and life is hard. It's really hard, and you should be commended because you did something that you showed up. And 80% of people never show up, and so don't minimize what you've done.
Here's my bone, man, and this is what's getting under my skin.
Don't bone me, man.
Shut up. Simply this: we don't disagree on that, Brandon. What I'm saying is that there are those of us out there who need to go and do it. I'm not saying anybody's reasoning is illegitimate. I'm saying that, guess what? It can be done. And those of us that can do it have a moral responsibility to going back and doing it. One of the things I've committed to doing for the local party is going to the poorest areas in Tacoma and knocking on doors. Because I'm from that area, and I know those people. I can be like, hey, here is the information. Those of us that can must. So those who cannot, for physical, mental reasons, whatever, who don't know about things like early voting in most states, who can mail in a ballot. There are multiple ways to get things through if you can't be there in person. Those of us who are able to, need to get up and go do it. And that is the problem that I have, is there are a lot of people who sit here and talk sanctimoniously about, well, this, and this. Get up and go do the damn thing. Get up and participate. Get up and help out who cannot. That is your moral responsibility.
If you want more of this conversation, be sure to check out TBD, Two Black Dudes podcast.
I can agree with you. So I think now we're seeing where we intersect here. And what I would say too is that when it comes down to Bernie or bust and a lot of this sort of the huge hoopla about it, there are legitimate reasons to not vote for Hillary Clinton. There are legitimate reasons to do a lot of things. But I will say that a lot of people gave up on the system before they ever tried it, and that's unacceptable. To give up on the system before you try it, no matter what you've heard, to assume that every avenue is illegitimate before you've tried, because you've only tried one, it's understandable, but it's not. But that's not a good excuse. to say, well, I voted in the presidential election and that was corrupt, so I'm never going to vote again in anything. That's stupid. Like at that point, that's just illegitimate. But I don't we don't disagree enough for me to come up with any kind of to.
Yeah, you guys are actually agreeing more than you're not agreeing.
I just think you were being too aggressive with making it seem as though you were talking about everyone who just doesn't go.
I know who he's yelling at. He's yelling at me. He's yelling. I know exactly who Adair is yelling at. He's right. We are sitting. The human condition is we're fucking lazy, especially in this country. We're either lazy or we're working our ass off. And there's two types of people in this world. My mother-in-law is in a nursing home, which a lot of us are going to end up in. And there's one dude there. These CNAs have 11 patients per CNA. And I'm not going to say any names, but this one guy works 16 hours a day, double shifts, because that's the only way he can make a living, because he doesn't have a living wage. Yep. So he's working 16 hours back to back all week long. Then I'm sure he's going home and taking care of folks at home, because people that do that, they do that for people at home too. So then he probably doesn't have internet because he can't afford cable, and it's not free anywhere. So there's that. And go to the library. Okay. So and so that's not the guy you're yelling at, Adair. I know. Well, you're yelling at me sitting here playing Assassin's Creed 3 all day long, and tweeting about Jill Stein's press conference tomorrow, which we're going to cover live, people.
Well, I mean, okay, so I've had.
So I have to cut in here, Brandon. I'm sorry.
Sorry. No, go ahead.
We are rounding out our show as goes on the Benjamin Dixon Show channel, but I think we're gonna continue the conversation here. It's too good, and it's gonna go further. So to those of you who want to keep up with Benjamin Dixon and what he's going to be talking about the next hour, go to the Benjamin Dixon Show channel. Those of you on the Benjamin Dixon Show channel who likes this discussion and wants to hear where we're going to take it over the next, 15, 20 minutes, go to projectsanity.org. In either case, this is the Project Sanity channel. This is the Project Sanity show. My name is Nis Pedersen, and I am the co-host and co-creator of the show. My partner, Richard Green, could not be here today. So I'm having an excellent discussion with Adair Schmidt, Brandon, and Dave Coennen. And we have been trying to do some news today, but we haven't been able to go very far without everyone going off on very interesting tangents. And I would like to say to those of you who are interested in the live Jill Stein press conference, Dave, can you tell us when that will be? There are people in the chat room asking curiously when it will be.
Yeah, I just threw that cherry bomb in there. That's at 8:30 East, 8:30 Pacific, right, Brandon? 11:30 Eastern. Yeah. And we're going to bring it to you live here at projectsanity.org. We just heard about it today, and it's going to be about Brandon is in NYC, so he's going to cover it for us. And I think, Brandon, she's going to talk about the Green New Deal and the debates, I believe, right?
Yeah, she's going to talk about the Green New Deal and opening up the debates to third parties, all four third parties. So she's interested in getting libertarians in there as well. So.
Yeah, they've had a lawsuit along with the Libertarians. There's another one pending, but they're not counting on that. So they're going to use the court of public opinion, as she said yesterday. And thanks again, Brandon, for jumping in with me and watching that. That was a lot of fun, and that was a great town hall. I really enjoyed it. But today's show has been really amazing. There's a lot of, this isn't strange times, Nis. There's a lot of passion. There's a lot of hopefully all of this energy, like Adair wants, goes out into the street and gets people moving, and I think it is.
It's already in the streets. Didn't you hear about? There is a city in Wisconsin that outside Wisconsin that basically burned for 3 days straight.
Yeah, Milwaukee. Yeah.
Yeah, Milwaukee.
Yeah, just Milwaukee. That's all. Although Milwaukee's got its problems. It's one of the cities that's really the epitome of what's wrong with our system and where our priorities are. There's a few of them, but Milwaukee's definitely one of them.
But we're nearly at the top of the hour, and the Benjamin Dixon Show needs to take over. So, Dave, there is a question from Eric, who is in the Slack that you need to quickly take a look at.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone who is going to go to the Benjamin Dixon Show for tuning in, and for those of you